Former and current U.S. administration has brought the sanctions against Milorad Dodik. What kind of message this sends to Bosnia and Herzegovina and RS in particular?
Well, the message that's intended is that he is not only not a friend of the United States, he's not a friend of the Dayton Accords, he's not an ingredient for progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the view of the Americans.
Former U.S. President Joe Biden has broke his silence after leaving the White House, and he gave a very interesting statement regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina, saying that the genocide has happened in Bosnia. How important is that the Biden is speaking, and how important this message is for Bosnia?
I know that I'm sure it's important to some Bosnians, but it seems to me at this point that the notion that there was genocide at Srebrenica is fairly well established, even though I know experts on genocide who don't agree. But once the court had spoken, I think that's the end of that story.
President Izetbegovic has launched the revision process for our case against Serbia for genocide. There is a great deal of panic in RS. Why they are panicking, in your opinion?
They stand accused. That's why they're panicking. And the same is true of Belgrade, of course, as well. Look, I'm not a terrific fan of the way in which this appeal was launched. It wasn't launched with approval of all of the ethnic groups and their political representatives in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it seems to me that 22 years after the war, there should have been enough progress to enable it to be done in a unified kind of way. And I don't blame Izetbegovic. He's not entirely at fault, but it is a sad story that Bosnia and Herzegovina can't jointly face the accusation, not the accusation, but that Bosnia and Herzegovina can't join together in accusing the perpetrators of the Srebrenica massacre.
Many have said that this crisis, which was brought up by a start of the revision process, is the most serious since the Dayton times. Dodik and Ivanic are using inflammatory rhetorics. Izetbegovic is firing back. Čovjek is silent. Is this a really biggest crisis for Bosnia, and should we be scared of it?
Well, I think it's of concern. I don't think it's the biggest crisis. I can remember in the 90s any number of other crises in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the important thing is that this is being handled in political channels, basically. This isn't leading to violence and shouldn't lead to violence. Look, the problem is that the Dayton agreements froze the warring parties in place and did not enable Bosnia to get past the stage of ethnic organization of its political life. And the consequences are quite clear. We need to get past this.
Revision process has put the strains on the relationship between Belgrade and Sarajevo, and relations between Sarajevo and Zagreb are not the great. Do you think that there is a chance to make a better relationship in the future between these three cities?
I do think so. I think in particular with Belgrade that Prime Minister Vučićev, with whom I've spoken personally about it, really does want a better relationship with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dodik isn't his man in any sense. Dodik doesn't support him, and he hasn't generally supported Dodik either. But look, I mean, you can expect, so far as the genocide case is concerned, Serbia will be on the other side. I mean, that's necessarily the case, but that shouldn't prevent cooperation between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. With respect to Croatia, you know, a lot depends on the politics in Zagreb. They haven't always been very favorable to good relations with Bosnia and Herzegovina. But look, if you're a Croat today, Croatian today, your future lies in the European Union. It doesn't lie in Herzegovina, and Široki Brijeg should be a really minor concern.
You have just mentioned Aleksandar Vučić, who's now a presidential candidate in front of his SNS party. What kind of effect this candidacy could have on Serbia, good or bad? Also, what kind of effect will have on Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Of course, it depends whether he wins or not, and who wins in the parliamentary election as well. But in my view, Vučić has made a definitive choice for Europe. By running for president, he has essentially undone Nikolić, who had made a political choice for Moscow. And from my point of view, better Brussels than Moscow for sure. I think there's much more to be gained from Belgrade having a good relationship with Brussels than a good relationship with Moscow. So in a way, I see it as a positive thing, but it all depends on the outcome of the elections, not just on who's a candidate.
And you spoke so many times regarding that who should react in Bosnia and Herzegovina more, Washington or Brussels? And in this time of crisis, especially crisis like this, do you think that the Brussels or Washington should react and calm relations in Bosnia?
The Americans have a role, but look, they're also totally preoccupied at this point with their own transition to the Trump administration, which frankly is an ethnic nationalist administration and may not be as negative about ethnic nationalism as the Obama administration and the Bush administration and the Clinton administration were. So I think a great deal of burden of doing the right things in the Balkans falls to Europe today, not just Brussels, but in particular Berlin, Paris, Rome, and London, frankly, as long as it's still a member. But even after it leaves the European Union, it will be an important weight in the world. I'd like to see Europe step up to this, and you can't imagine how low on the list of priorities the Balkans are today in Washington.
You have just mentioned Washington, and we just passed the mark of the first month of Trump administration, and you're working in Washington. You know how the administrations have played out over the years. What is your general view of his first month in the office?
Look, I have to acknowledge that I was a supporter of Hillary Clinton for the presidency. I voted for her. But the view I'll give you is not uncommon in Washington. It has been a catastrophically chaotic month for the Trump administration. They have sent mixed messages about lots and lots of things: the NATO alliance, the EU, the Chinese, the Russians. I mean, it's just a jumble of mixed messages. The president tried to straighten that out in an address to Congress the other night. I think his tone was improved, but the content was pretty disastrously bad. In addition, he just doesn't have a real administration in place. None of the assistant secretaries, undersecretaries at the State Department have been even named, much less confirmed. Now they're facing an attorney general who apparently lied to the Congress about whether he had contacts with the Russians during the campaign. I mean, these are things that are really awful, and I don't expect it to settle down anytime soon.